Welcome to episode 15 of the While She Naps podcast. I'm Abby Glassenberg. My guest today is Sonya Philip. Sonya is a fiber artist living in San Francisco. She knits and felts and sews, and her work really crosses the boundary between art and craft. I met Sonya on Twitter and was drawn to her most recent project called 100 Acts of Sewing, in which she's created 100 dresses in a year. Through the project, Sonya's exploring the workmanship required to create your own wardrobe and what the word fashion has come to mean. She's developed a set of very simple dress patterns that she uses to teach workshops so that other people can examine these ideas as well. Sonya Philip, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me, Abby.
All right, so let's just get started with a little bit about your background. Tell me about your life growing up. Did you live in a creative household?
Yeah, I did. I think that really is what sort of started me on the path of just being a maker and an artist. Both my parents are very creative. My dad is an architect, but who was trained as an architect, but worked as a project manager. And my mom trained as an interior designer. And just around the house growing up, there was always a project. My parents bought an old Victorian house in San Francisco, and my dad's idea of, relaxing on the weekends was, after coming home from big job sites of tall skyscrapers, would come home and fix up the house. And so there was always this element of just do it yourself and possibility. And growing up, my brother and I would just be around this and see it, and then also participate. That we both still have that very much in our lives. That if anything needs to be done, yes, you could call someone, but you could also try doing it yourself first. So we both know how to. My brother actually in college learned how to paint houses, so he's a little more ahead of me that he can actually paint the exterior of house. I mainly just know how to paint the inside, but tiling and other things. And I think that it's really, there's that element of having, being sort of witness to it and having it around in your life and seeing that making. One of my older children went to a Waldorf school when he was younger, and there's that idea in the pedagogy there as far as just children being around handwork, and that even if they're not necessarily always knitting or sewing, that if the adults in their lives are doing it, it's enriching. And I was always really drawn to that. My mother, she is an amazing cook. And so having, food, always homemade food and dinners, that was always very important. And just, and she would also sew. She learned how to sew as a child, and I learned both from her, but I guess formally in school. And that was, although she didn't do it regularly, she had a sewing machine, and she would take it out, and if something, needed to be done, then there was the sewing machine. Right. So it definitely was in my life.
And when you said that you learned to sew in school, were you referring to grade school or high school or to college?
I learned in middle school.
In middle school.
There was home economics. And we actually, in the school that I went to, there was a specific needlework class where everybody learned, meaning boys and girls learned how to use a sewing machine.
That's fantastic. That's actually where I learned how to sew as well, 8th grade, home economics, which I sadly think there's very few home economics classes left anymore. But all right, so You spent some of your childhood, I know, in Hong Kong. What was that experience like? When did you move there?
I moved there when I was 8 years old. My dad actually got headhunted and was offered a job there. It was just an adventure to do that when you're 8. I kind of feel that's how it was billed to me as a child. Just, yes, we're leaving this home that you know, and, you know, your school and all your friends, and we're moving to this foreign country. Of course, I was born in the Philippines, and I moved here when I was 3. So it's not like it was unknown, but I guess to me, I didn't really remember that. And so this was something that was really clear in my mind. And so I had very, very clear memories of just the adventure, you know, even from just moving there to where our whole house was packed up and put into a container, shipped across, and of course we got there before our things did, and so we stayed in a hotel. It must have been a couple of weeks, but we arrived there in the summer, and that was just thrilling as a child to live in a hotel and just have this time to just wander around and explore with my mom and my brother. It was such a cosmopolitan city. I went to a British school there, but it was very international, and I had classmates from all over the world.
How long were you there for?
I lived there for 8 years.
Oh, wow. So that was a long time, and some of those were like really formative early teenage years, too.
Yes, yes. You know, that was also an interesting time in the history of Hong Kong as well, because it was when they were preparing for the talks to hand Hong Kong back over from the British to China. And it was just this tremendous period of growth. It was the 80s. And so, you know, everything was about money and wealth, and Hong Kong was at the center of it. So it was very exciting.
Yeah. Interesting experience. What an interesting sort of early life experience. So you came back to the United States, and you went to college, got a degree in creative writing. And you consider yourself to be self-taught when it comes to art. Did you take some art classes in college, though? I mean, how did you learn to be an artist?
You know, I never took, save for a bookmaking class, book arts class when I was in graduate school, I never managed to take an art class in college. My sort of route was kind of a circuitous one. When I was in high school, I loved art, took art classes. They were my favorite classes, and always intended to go to art school. And, you know, that just was, you know, I self-identified as an artist just very early on, elementary school. Just, I loved making and drawing and all sorts of things. And then I had a child very early, and that sort of put a pause in going directly to school, and had a, you know, young toddler while I started my undergraduate. And what I found was, when I would look at, you know, the class catalog every year, I'd look at, you know, the classes I should take, and then the art classes. And the art classes always seemed to be bang in the middle of the day. These were the studio art classes, and several hours long. And even though I had amazing childcare on campus, it always just seemed like this, I don't know, like a luxury I couldn't afford or justify, that all that time would then eat up my schedule, and then I wouldn't be able to take other classes. And so it never really worked out, and I never took a class. So I went I went in as an art history major, and then that changed from art history to anthropology to finally landing in just literature, and then from there, creative writing. I could not make up my mind, and just was interested in lots of things. And then I guess creative writing was a creative outlet in among those things. So,
and did you say that you went to graduate school after that?
I did, yes. And I got my MFA in creative writing with an emphasis in poetry. In that, I think you had to take, there was a requirement of taking, not just your regular literature classes and your workshops, but you had to take another, type of class for the degree requirement. And they had this amazing book arts program. And so I took a book arts class, and it was really, it was a really nice introduction. And I always tell people that book arts was one of the most useful classes maybe in all my education, and that I use the things that I learned there so much, and not just art, but many things. So,
what are some of the things from that class that you do use?
Just even simple things like folding paper and using a bone folder. I never knew about a bone folder, and just how to glue things, and stab bindings. I got really good at non-adhesive bindings because I would procrastinate and not do my homework until the night before, and you can't glue things just on the fly. So most of my work was sewn bindings and various ways of folding, and it's really just a really interesting craft.
Yeah, and it's interesting too in that it combines both the sort of make it yourself, DIY if something needs to be done attitude of, your childhood, along with a place to put the poems.
Yes, definitely.
So that's neat. Okay, so after graduate school, it sounds like you started to make art sort of more as a more serious and maybe more kind of full-time idea. So what was that transition like?
So after graduate school, I kind of felt that the way I like to see it is almost that I think getting my degree in creative writing sort of saved art for me, because I felt that going to school and studying poetry and just going to workshop after workshop, it almost, beat it out of me, that I just got so tired, and it killed my love of writing, that at the end of it, I was sort of wrung dry and didn't really have any more poems in me, as it were. I still write occasionally, but I didn't choose to pursue writing further. I had 2 children at that point, and because it seems like I go to school, I have a child. That seemed to be my what I would do, just like not satisfied with making school just be the hard thing. So I, at that point, got really into knitting. This is sort of where, and also really into blogs. And actually, when you were saying we met on Twitter, I remember reading your blog, and just that was, I guess, the heyday. I guess we're talking 2004, 2005, when all of these craft blogs were really sort of hitting their stride. And so I discovered this whole world of not just knitting online, but also just people who would make things and take photos and share. and I started a blog myself, and a knitting blog, and it doesn't exist anymore.
What was that blog called?
It was called Knit Sonya. Just knit plus my name. And it was really finding a community. And I didn't have necessarily one, where I lived, that I'd go to knitting groups, and there would be, parents at schools that were creative, but really, through blogs and online, I found this like-minded people who were interested in making things and interested in sharing. And how I approached knitting was, I say that I took to it like a duck to water, and just knit constantly, and would knit from patterns, but also I would just think up things, and was always drawn to experimenting. And, well, could that be done? Could you knit with dental floss? Would it be possible to do this? And just was always thinking about it. I designed knitting patterns. I made things to sell, like hats, and sold them in stores. And I tried all of these different things with knitting. I guess it was just like how to parlay my passion for knitting into something more. I guess how to keep me in yarn really was the sort of the bottom line. I realized that it's like, okay, well, I can't really knit, these beautiful hats for stores, because I'm, making $1 an hour, and my little sweatshop for one making them, and it's extremely fold deadening to just knit the same thing over and over again. And taking an idea, seeing if it would work, and doing it one time or several times, and then moving on to the next thing. That just was worked with my personality and perhaps attention span.
And then those finished things would end up being really more art pieces than...
Yeah. Mm-hmm. The idea of just having it be one-off rather than, okay, now make 20 of these. And I guess that is how, through knitting, it helped transition from, here is just a utilitarian piece to more something, I guess, an art piece.
Right. And then those art pieces, it seems as though you've created small series. So even though you didn't like production work of making, 25 hats to sell in a retail store, making a series of 10 shapes, knitted shapes that sort of vary but relate to one another did appeal to you.
It did. I think, it might go back to, I don't know, when I was writing poems, I could never really, I had classmates who would write these page-long, pages of poetry or long sagas, and I could never do that. I would always just write these small, several-line poems. And a way of sort of getting around that was like, okay, if I can write a whole, 20 of these 4-line and just put them together, then that's how we can sort of box them up. And I just struggle. I guess I don't know if it's so much attention span as more like I like things to be succinct and I don't necessarily want to pad things. And so for me, in my work, it's a way of really exploring it. If I have an idea, then I'll, do this sort of rough draft, try it out the first time. And then through doing something over and over again, each time I'm perfecting it, exploring a new way. And, it's really very soothing and meditative to, when you can almost let go of the thinking and just let the hands, that they have a memory. And when you're doing something that you've done over and over again, that point of where you're just lost in the work and you know what to do, the exact movements of, okay, I'm going to start, I'm going to do this, the needle goes like this, and you don't even have to think about it. That place is a really wonderful one. As I said, it's a meditation.
It is. It's blissful. That's absolutely. I like to be there at least a little while every day. So that actually brings us to 100 acts of sewing. So you set yourself a goal to sew 100 dresses in a year, which is kind of an amazing goal, with sort of a focus on the skill and the craftsmanship required to make your own clothing. So first, why dresses?
Yeah, the focus was on dresses because I really wanted a uniform, and I had some linen dresses that, one or two that I loved, and had always thought, okay, if I could just find more of these, I would wear them. That's all I would wear. And having young kids but being tired of just putting on the sweatpants and the t-shirt, I wanted to look a little more put together, but I didn't want to spend a lot of time thinking about it. And so hence the idea of a uniform. And I think that would be completely at odds with my younger self, who had school uniforms and hated them. But really, you don't have to think about, you don't have to stand in front of your closet and think, what am I going to wear today? I kept thinking like, oh, I love this. How can, and I can't find it anywhere. How can I duplicate this? And I didn't trust at that point my own sewing skills. As I said, I had learned in middle school. I found sewing frustrating, that I could do it, but my ideas were always, at sort of one level, and then my ability was at quite another. And I would get frustrated that the end product would never meet my expectations. And also I wanted it to be done. I wanted to rush through it and have realized that, well, you can't do that with sewing. It does take time. And there are lots of finicky steps. And if you don't do, half of them, then you're not going to end up with a very great looking end result. But I just kept insisting on doing it my way, the shortcut way. And while this worked for making things like Halloween costumes for kids or wonky quilts, it didn't really translate well into garments that I would wear out in the world. With that, I kept thinking, like, okay, maybe I could take this to a tailor and have it made. Well, I never got to that point because I thought, well, that's going to be expensive. Well, maybe I could send it with my mom if she goes to the Philippines and have it made there. Well, that never happened. Maybe I could trawl on eBay to try and find more of these. Well, you can spend your whole life doing that.
Can I ask, where did that original dress come from? Like, where did you find that original linen dress?
I think that I found that from a thrift store. It's a flax linen dress, and it just was really simple, square neck, princess seams, and just one of those things where they made it one season, and that was several seasons ago, and they never, they never repeated that particular design. And
so did you just lay it down on a piece of paper and trace it and try?
What I ended up doing first was going back to thrift stores, and if you look at what's available for some reason, there are, maybe because they're completely unwearable, there are a lot of these ankle-length linen dresses available. So what I first started doing was taking those and chopping them off, and this is, when I look back and my sort of like devil may care, what I did was I chopped the hem off and then undid the side seams and then created panels from the bottom of the dress and sewed them in, and then made an atrocious hem, and that was my first sort of successful reconstruction. And so I wore it, and that was workable. And then I had a friend who kept saying, you should sew. And I said, no, I can't. I'd convinced myself, nope, I can't make garments for myself. I can't do that. She told me about this woman, Cow Patch, who has a website called Hodgepodge Farm. And she has a book, and I believe it's called Design It Yourself Clothes, or Design Yourself Clothes. I always get the title wrong. And I got the book, I looked at it. It seemed too complicated for me, but this friend owns a store and called A Verb for Keeping Warm, and she brought Cow Patch in to teach a class on basic pattern making. And so I took the class, and everything kind of clicked. It wasn't a sewing class. It was how to draft a pattern. So what we did was we made a basic skirt and then a basic dress. Even though I wasn't sewing in that class, there was enough sewing language being used. I realized that I knew more than I thought I did, and that I was understanding things. Things were clicking. And, also Cal is an extremely patient teacher. And I went home from that, and the next day went out and bought some muslin, bought a French curve, went and redrafted a pattern, and made a muslin, made it way too large, changed it up, and then, I had all this fabric, because even though I wasn't technically sewing, I was still buying fabric because I loved it. And I used some fabric from my stash and made my first dress and put it on. And it was this like eureka moment of really, here was all these years of frustration and believing that I couldn't do something, and here all of a sudden I could. It was really a sort of moment of transfiguration. I thought, like, I made a dress, I made a garment, number one, and number two, it's cute and I would wear it. And I just thought for some reason, I went and made 3 more within that week. So I'd made 4 dresses in a week, all, different iterations of the same pattern, just using different fabric. I just was swept up in the enthusiasm of, it's almost like this dam had just burst that I could do it. And I don't know when, but the number 100 popped into my head, and I just thought, I'm going to make 100 dresses, that I was so just incredibly happy that, and in that, I guess, delirium, the number 100 popped in. And at that point, the idea for a project hadn't crystallized. It was just, as I said, this sort of giddiness. While this was sort of taking over my life, I thought, well, I really, if only there was a way to make this, into a project. And I don't know if it was in February or March, but I think probably by February I started then documenting and taking photographs of the dresses that I'd made, and then came up with a name. And then I guess all dresses, because it was some consistency, and your original question, why dresses? It's something that I wore and wear on a daily basis. And then I started putting the photos on a Tumblr site and wrote a brief statement, and then, just kept making them and photographing each one as I made them, and having some consistency in photographing, always on a white wall with a hanger. At first, all of the dresses were very similar. Then, as I got deeper into the project, they started, they changed, they varied, and it was really an interesting experience.
So I want to talk a little bit about body image. So I don't sew clothes for myself, and one of the reasons I don't is because I don't know that I want to spend time showing off my body, which I guess is sort of a sad statement, but it's true. I'm 5'2". I'm not super thin. I don't look like the sewing bloggers that you see who are like fashion models who sew all their own clothes. And so anyway, I guess for me, that's always been the biggest sort of stumbling block in feeling like, do I really want to spend time sewing something for myself? So tell us a little bit, what do you look like? I'm talking to you from Boston. You're in San Francisco. We've never met in person. So how tall are you? Do you fit into off the rack clothes? Do you like the way they fit you?
Well, I'm a little taller than you, but not much. 5'5". And I am, I guess, what you would call heavy. Larger woman is the term, I guess. A woman of size. So I fit into, if things have enough stretch, I could squeeze into an extra large or an extra large. But really, this sort of quest for a wardrobe did come from, or a uniform did come from, frustration with what was available. And, if you go into, say, the plus size clothing stores, and, I did not necessarily want to look like Stevie Nicks and wear bell sleeves or have a maxi dress or things like that. So I loved the clean lines of, Japanese, fashion and sewing books. But of course, if, even for an average sized person, Japanese sewing books, they're created for a, entirely different population. And so, I was never really going to be able to make something. So really learning how to draft my own patterns, it just coming to it from that path, I think was really valuable. What I've noticed, not only through knitting, but also through sewing, is that idea of, you mentioned not wanting to look at your body, and I think that extends to not wanting to measure either, that you don't, it's really along the same token of weighing yourself, that there's the reality in stark numbers.
It absolutely is. That's exactly right.
And it's really, you can't measure yourself accurately. You have to measure somebody else. And then you're involving somebody else in this too. So then they're going to know. And so, right. So it's really, and in teaching workshops also, what I've noticed is that, there will be women who I consider, that if I weighed the same amount I'd be extremely happy, and I'm outclassing them by stones, and they will not want to put on a dress because I have samples of sizes. They'll choose a larger size, and I'll say, well, no, why don't you try this one, and it's more fitted, and so I think that there's and I know just from my experience that there's my own personal experience that, we don't want to have to think about our bodies, and that I guess it's that sort of disconnect. And so I joke that, my dresses, they're A-line. I joke that it's body unconscious instead of body conscious. And really, just the older I've gotten, I want things to be comfortable. And so something that I could just pull on, it's loose, it's, my weight fluctuates from one time of the month to another. So I don't want something that's like, oh, okay, now this is tight. Oh, and so really just pull on this, pop this over my head, good to go.
But at the same time, that garment is really beautiful. Like, I don't want to give the impression that the dresses in 100 Acts of Sewing aren't beautiful. I know that, you've exhibited them, and some of them ended up being for sale because I bought dress 14, so I know that they've been for sale. So how did the project? You had a Tumblr, you were taking the photos, you thought of a name for the project, you're wearing the dresses.
Yes.
And then there were sort of sewing patterns came out from them for teaching workshops and an exhibit and sale as well. So how did sort of it go from a personal project to a project that was out in the world like that?
So I think, one thing I decided was that I wanted to make dresses not just for me, but for other people. And what that ended up being was a really great education on sizes and making things fit a variety of sizes, and from anything from, literally a size 2 on up to, to a size 3XL. And so it really, how to take, a basic pattern and make it work. And how to do that. So I really, and in the beginning, I was just drafting a new pattern. I would get someone's bust size and their measurements, and then just draft a pattern specifically for them. And as the project progressed, I decided to teach workshops, and then used a basic dress and graded, meaning made a specific pattern of sizes in, however many inch increments. It really, afforded me just this idea that I didn't want to make clothes that would only fit just one type of body, that I wanted clothes that would be universally flattering to any person, any shape or size. And, a lot of that comes from just an A-line, that it's an A-line silhouette looks good on just about everybody. So I made these dresses, and what I always knew that I wanted to, once the project was done, exhibit them. So I contacted friends, and people ended up contacting me as well, and said, okay, you want me to make you a dress? Well, or I want to make a dress for you, but I'm not going to sell this to you because I want it back, and I might need it back. And so early on, I did send out the dresses to people, and people wore them. And sometimes they were made for a specific person, and sometimes there were dresses that were made because I wanted to try something out, or I was testing sizes for developing patterns. Not only was it an education, just learning how to make different sizes and different styles, but also it was great fun to really think of a person and think of their personality and make a dress. And sometimes it would be just simple that, oh, they like this color. This reminds me of them. To sometimes I allowed myself to go really crazy and just mix and match patterns, and it was very fun. It was just, as I said, customizing that not only to their measurements, but also to sort of my picture of them in my mind. As the year progressed, I stopped sending dresses off and said, I've made this for you, but I'm not going to send it out. And I arranged to rent a space in a gallery. And when all of the dresses were done, hung them all up. And it was quite something in that you would walk into this room, and in order to hang the dresses, my extremely talented and accommodating husband helped me measure it out. And I would have just started hanging them, but he had the forethought to measure the room and really mark out. So they were all hung 4 dresses high, and all on all 4 walls of the room. And it was pretty spectacular. You just walk in and see just wall to wall dresses, this whole room essentially insulated in dresses. And it was really something, seeing just sort of the product of a whole year and seeing them, because yes, you get the same idea if you look through the Tumblr or the website. And also I have a sort of grid of all of them together, but just seeing them all there and seeing how they related to each other, how you would see that, maybe I was, how one fabric would be used in one dress and then, maybe used in a pocket and a dress across the way, or how I would repeat things. And it was really great to see that and see it all at once.
So I want to pause just briefly because I think now it's a good time to mention that we have a really sweet little good giveaway that you've put together. So I know you have a little goodie bag. Tell us what's in the goodie bag that relates to 100 Acts of Sewing, and how people who are listening might be able to get a chance to win.
Yeah, so I do have some patterns that I've designed, and they're available for sale in my Etsy store. And just as part of this podcast, I've put together a bag to give away for 2 patterns, 2 dress patterns, as well as an issue of Taproot magazine, where I designed what's called the Taproot tunic. And so all 3 of these so it'd be Taproot magazine, dress pattern for dress number 1 and dress number 2 in the size of your choice. Available in a stylish little 100 Acts of Sewing bag. And if you can enter to own these, and all you need to do is leave a comment on the While She Naps blog of this podcast episode, and in the comment, just let me know, since all of this started out from, a favorite piece of clothing of mine. Leave a comment where you tell us about a favorite piece of clothing of yours. It can be something that you made, something that someone made for you, or it could just be a cherished piece of that you bought. And but just tell us why it's special to you, what it is, why it's special, and good luck.
Yeah, so this podcast goes up on March 3rd. So we'll keep the contest open for 2 weeks until March 17th, 2014. And on March 17th, we'll close up the comments and draw a winner. So that's exciting. Thank you so much, Sonya. Okay, so just sort of to wrap things up a little bit, let's think about tell me about how 100 Acts of Sewing has sort of changed the way you think about yourself and your wardrobe, I love your Pinterest board. You've got like the best Pinterest board ever, because you pin beautiful clothes that I feel like anyone could wear. So I'm just wondering how this project has affected you.
Well, I think it's affected me in many profound ways. One way is I really don't shop for clothes anymore. I used to shop at thrift stores or just regular stores and look for clothes. And now I really don't do that anymore. And some of it is that I just, instead of buying something that might meet some of my needs, I can make that same thing or something similar and have it meet all my needs. It could, fit me, or be in the color I want or the fabric that I want. I definitely think about how things are made, where things are made. That informs my purchases much more. But really, I haven't really bought clothes since, and that's in 2 years. And I think that the other thing that it's done has been that, the very fact that I can make, what I want to wear is really just so fulfilling. And to have that skill, and I also, it's a continuous thing. I told somebody that I approach sewing with great humility, that I don't think that I've got it. I think that I'm continually honing my skills, and that I don't aspire to couture techniques. And there's just a range. And I think that, there will always be something that I can learn, that I can explore and discover and improve upon. But just even, with the simplest techniques, to be able to, with just a handful of seams, be able to make a serviceable garment that's flattering, is really, it's a skill. And having those skills, it's something concrete that it's a basic. It's like being able to scramble an egg. It's this. I don't know. I guess my end of the world skills. I guess I don't know. So I will look fashionable once the zombie invasion comes. So
fantastic. And I think that's actually a great note to end on. This has been fantastic, Sonya. Thank you so much. Where can we find you online?
Well, my main website is at www.sonyaphilip.com. And the project website is at www.100actsofsewing.com. On Twitter, I am Sonya Philip. On Instagram, I am also Sonya Philip. And Pinterest, same thing. And I have a Facebook page if you just look up Sonya Philip. And on Etsy, my Etsy store is 100 Acts of Sewing.
Super. And that's where we can go to get pattern for dress 1 and dress 2.
Yes. And more to come, hopefully.
Oh, I hope so. That's
still adding, things on down the line. I hope to add more, not just dresses, but tops and bottoms, skirts, etc. So
that's super. We'll be looking for that. And listeners, remember to enter the giveaway. Leave a comment on the blog post about your favorite garment, whether you made it or bought it, either way. And we'll select a winner on March 17th to get both patterns and the copy of Taproot as well. Thank you so much. So you've been listening to the While She Naps podcast. I'm Abby Glassenberg. If you've got a question or have a comment about today's show, please head over to my blog, whileshenaps.com, and I hope you enjoyed it. Bye-bye.